The views and opinions expressed in this program are not meant to alarm anyone, but merely start an intelligent discussion about an interesting phenomenon, the possibility that an intelligent life form does exist and is actively making contact with the Earth.
Welcome to UFO Update Live. My name is Jerry Black, UFO researcher and investigator. On August 21st, 1993, just 3 days before the Mars Observer was to drop into orbit around Mars, NASA announced that they had lost contact with the billion-dollar vehicle. A detailed map of Mars made by the observer was to have laid the foundation for future manned expeditions early in the 21st century. Is there some connection between the announced loss of this billion-dollar space probe and a unique rock structure found on Mars, the so-called face on Mars? Tonight's program is the first of a two-part series investigating the mystery of Mars Observer loss and the possibility of NASA's involvement in a cover-up. Later in this program, we'll tell you how you could help us solve a UFO mystery that has baffled ufology for over 46 years. So stay tuned and join us for UFO Update Live, the face on Mars.
Seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
It was 1976. At long last, the human species was finally on its way to Mars with two unmanned Viking spacecraft. The official goal of the eventual soft landing and of the scientific objectives to be carried out was the search for life on Mars. But the Viking mission, which was to resolve those fatal questions, is there life on Mars, has inspired only rancor and continued controversy for over 15 years, to this very day. Since 1983, science advisor Richard C. Hoagland has led a dedicated group of researchers in a broad-based scientific effort to try and figure out the set of enigmatic objects in a northern Martian desert called Cydonia, whose existence now astonishingly supports the former presence of intelligent life on the planet Mars. He and his colleagues are now working to decode the surprising mathematical message they discovered at Cydonia and to apply it to newly discovered but still baffling processes occurring in the solar system. Now you will see the evidence for yourself.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panel of experts. First, on my extreme left is Terry Endres. Terry Endres is a UFO researcher and investigator. He is also a school teacher. He's also an amateur astronomer. And just recently, Terry and I worked on an article for UFO Magazine concerning the Gulf Breeze case, and Terry did the writing for me, and I really appreciate that. Welcome, Terry. Next to Terry, we have Pat Packard. Pat Packard has been with the Mutual UFO Network. He is Assistant State Director and has recently started his own group called ASK. Next to Terry, I should say, Pat, is my wife, Peggy Black, who's a UFO researcher and investigator. I'll start with you, Terry. First of all, is there really any connection between the face on Mars and UFOs?
Well, by the fact that if the face on Mars proves to be artificial, then we have to assume that someone had built it, and if someone had built it, they probably came from another planet. Now, that means aliens. And one of the more popular theories behind UFOs has always been the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which means that UFOs are alien craft of some sort. Now, just because we might be able to prove the face on Mars is an artifact made by an alien civilization doesn't prove that UFOs exist. They don't necessarily have a direct connection. However, the implication that there is life out there in the universe makes it a little easier to look at UFOs in this frame as alien craft as opposed to just some kind of crazy little fad that people go through.
Does the fact, Terry, that this structure is obviously facing upward instead of sideways, like we have a mountain where we have some sculptures of the 5 presidents, which obviously upon getting there you can see readily the entire face. This, as I understand, structure is a mile long, 1,500 feet high, so obviously from ground level there's not much you can discern from this. So is there any significance in the fact that it's facing upward? Would that necessarily mean that there's more probability this could be something to do with alien life form of some type?
Well, we can only make the assumption that if it's facing upward, it was meant to be seen by someone above it, or further away, maybe looking from a probe or a satellite. Certainly that's significant. Also important to remember is that certain kinds of geometric and geological things that we have on this planet, like Old Man in the Mountain in New Hampshire, can only be seen as a face from a certain angle. The face on Mars, however, has a certain amount of symmetry that it appears to be a face from several angles. So it doesn't seem to be just a random pattern of geological features. So we might have to deal with the fact that it was built to be seen by someone other than anyone on the Martian surface.
Is there any way we can tell as to when it was built, if it was indeed a man-made structure?
Well, that gets ahead of things a little bit, but probably due to the damage that we can see in the images from craters, we're talking thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years at least.
Okay. Terry, you have made a most interesting tape concerning the face on Mars. I had the privilege the other day to view the tape. And can you give us a little setup on this tape that you did for us? Because it was extremely well done. I really appreciate your work on that. And just tell us exactly what we're going to be seeing here and how you went about doing this.
Well, I edited the tape myself from films I had in my tape library. And basically I wanted to give sort of a general introduction to Mars, not simply because the face on Mars is such an enigmatic feature, but there's a history to Mars that has a certain aura of mystery about it, and that dates back about 100 years ago when people thought they were seeing straight lines on the surface of Mars, which we at the time called or thought were canals. So this segment was put together sort of as a brief history of Mars as a mystery planet.
Let's roll that tape now so we can see all the work that Terry put into this.
At its closest, Mars passes within 40 million miles of Earth. During the 1950s, researchers thought they'd found a correlation between UFO sighting frequency and this periodic nearness of Mars. This now appears to be coincidental. But this was not the first time Mars was presumed to have a link to extraterrestrial life. In the 1870s, an Italian astronomer, Giovanni Schiaparelli, made extensive observations of Mars in order to prepare a set of detailed topographical charts. He noted features that he described as canali, which translates into channels or grooves. Schiaparelli never intended to suggest that these features were anything other than natural markings. About a decade later, Schiaparelli's reports were published in English. The translator unfortunately chose to read canali to mean canal, an artificial waterway. To many, this unhappy word choice meant only one thing: there was life on Mars. Percival Lowell, a businessman with a head for astronomy, built an observatory near Flagstaff, Arizona, just to study these canals. By 1894, the observatory, housing an impressive 24-inch refracting telescope, was ready. Lowell enthusiastically set to work constructing intricate maps of the Martian surface. His chart showed twice the number of markings as recorded by Schiaparelli. Lowell concluded that the Martians were a dying race who built the canals to draw water from the polar ice caps to drench the parched plains and dried valleys of Mars. Not everyone agreed with Lowell, preferring to believe that the astronomer saw only what he expected to see and not what was actually there. This debate raged for decades. It was not until the late summer of 1976 that the question appeared to be answered. Two Viking probes, each consisting of an orbiter and a lander, seen here in this simulation, sent back thousands of pictures of the surface of Mars. Viking 1 landed on July 20th, 1976, followed by Viking 2 on September the 3rd. The probes showed Mars to be a desolate, almost forbidding place. Vast, rock-strewn deserts covered the entire planet. Some areas had been heavily cratered from meteor strikes. Other landscapes were dominated by huge volcanoes. And across the Martian plains ran an immense canyon that, if placed in the United States, would run from coast to coast. But no traces of Lowell's canals were ever found. In its place was uncovered a new, perhaps more alarming mystery.
Thank you for coming back to UFO Update Live. Terry, great. That was a great production. We really appreciate that. It was an excellent job, and thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Pat, the McDaniel Report, I know you studied it quite heavily in the last few weeks and, in fact, few months. Can you give us your opinion of the McDaniel Report, where he's erred in your opinion and where he seems to be on line in terms of his feeling that there is something to the face on Mars?
Well, that's a loaded question. There's a whole lot of things we could get into, and I think probably we'll have to see the visuals before we can explain most of it. But we didn't just accept, Mr. McDaniel did a report analyzing Hoagland's role in the face on Mars and his team of scientists, and NASA's role, which NASA's been much less than honest with us. But we went a step further than that. We talked to all the main scientists that contributed to Hoagland, and we've talked to other people, skeptics, other professors and what have you in the general area here, University of Cincinnati, Sinclair College, et cetera, to get opinions about a lot of statements Hoagland's made. Some of them aren't what they appear to be, and we'll get into that a little bit later, I guess. But I guess we'll have to see the tape really to get specific about it.
We have a couple of tapes coming up, but can you give us a background of Mr. Hoagland so the people out there will have some understanding as to what his qualifications are to be speaking and saying the things he's saying?
Well, Mr. Hoagland was with NASA. He designed the message, I believe, that was sent on, I forget the name of the probe, but we sent a message out into space on a record. He worked with Carl Sagan on that. He's developed this particular team of people that involves Earl Torren from the Defense Mapping Agency, Mark Carlotto, who's an expert in fractal geometry and actually did fractal geometry to identify man-made structures in the Gulf War. There's DePietro and Molinar, who are people who work for NASA, who've done work on this. He's assembled quite a few people with doctoral degrees and has done some excellent work on it, really, and there seems to be some validity to much of what he says, but there are some questions about some of the geomorphological things and about whether we're really dealing with numerology in some of his estimates, his numbers and what have you, measurements, I guess you'd say.
Right. Yes, later on we're going to have a couple tapes of Mr. Hoagland, and we'll be showing our viewers some of the ideas he has brought forth in terms of what he thinks about the face on Mars. Peggy, from a woman's perspective, what is your opinion just generally about the face on Mars? What do you think about the whole situation?
Well, to be honest, I've just recently begun to do any research on the face, but I find it to be very interesting, and I think there's a lot of food for thought as to where humans have been and where they're going and what it means. I think that there's something to it.
I see. Terry, what are your thoughts on this situation? Just a brief synopsis of Hoagland and what you think about his work that he's done so far.
Well, his numbers are impressive, but I think it's a little too early to call the shots right now. What we really need are better images, more accurate images, so that we can really make sure that the details that we're talking about on the face on Mars are actually there and not actually some kind of artifact from the imaging processing.
I see. In a few moments, we're going to be having a taped interview that Brian Skow, who will be joining us shortly here on the panel, has done with Brian O'Leary, a trained astronaut. And again, you gentlemen might want to give me a better background on Mr. O'Leary as to what his credentials are.
Well, he's worked with Carl Sagan. I believe he's a geophysicist, planetary scientist. In any case, he taught at Cornell and some of the other universities around the country, well-known universities. He was not. A lot of people say he was a trainee, but he was in fact in the program. He worked on the imaging team of one of the probes, Mariner 10.
Okay.
Have to look at Brian to get the right information here. Mariner 10. So he's got quite a credible history, and he's worked inside NASA for some time and in the academic community. So he's got some interesting comments to make.
I see. Well, why don't we go ahead and roll a tape of Mr. Brian O'Leary that was done with Brian Skow.
I'm with Dr. Brian O'Leary, a former planetary scientist with NASA during the Apollo missions. And Dr. O'Leary is now an author and a researcher in the term new sciences such as UFOs, psychic phenomena, and the crop circles, and etc. And you had written an article on the face on Mars, which was published in 1990, and it actually took you about 4 years to get that article published. Why do you think that much of the scientific community has refused to take a serious look at the data that has been compiled on the face on Mars, not only by yourself, but several other researchers as well?
Well, it's a long story, like a lot of stories, but I think it has to do with the cultural bias that scientists carry with them. I was certainly in that position myself when I worked closely with NASA, that there's a certain party line that develops which is biased against any kind of spectacular or sensationalistic sounding results, such as the possible hypothesis that extraterrestrials may have created these features on Mars and that they may be artifacts.
Right.
And so I can understand the dynamics. It's hard to ascribe specific reasons behind it, besides to say that most scientists spend years and years of their lives getting highly trained and investing their efforts in getting to the positions they're now in. And they're not going to want to abandon those positions easily. And so the convenience to keep your position and to enhance it is more important than the truth. And so why address a question that's so controversial? And also, of course, they took a position early on in this case, and the position that the scientists took was that there was nothing to the face on Mars. And to reverse that position, for a scientist to reverse a position is very embarrassing.
Right.
Because scientists are supposed to be the shepherds of the truth. So I think all of these dynamics it has to do with keeping your position, enhancing it, and holding on, and not wanting to reverse your position. It's like a politician. No politician wants to admit that they want to reverse their position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You recently made some recommendations to NASA concerning the Mars Observer and the newly published McDaniel Report. Ironically, one of your recommendations was for NASA to relay Martian images in real time so that the public would not be victims of censorship. Now, do you feel that NASA may be involved with a cover-up concerning the status of the Mars Observer spacecraft?
I think there's a very good chance of that. I can't say unequivocally. As a scientist, I don't want to fall into the same trap that the NASA scientists and Carl Sagan appeared to have fallen into, which is that to make ad hoc pronouncements or just freely throw around opinions. So I think it's quite possible that they have been tampering with the signal and that the pictures may be clandestinely being sent back. I don't think it's probable, but it's possible. Because if they were to do it, obviously NASA has already been given a lot of bad press, and to lose the signal just before coming to Mars and to cover up the signals coming in, since there are probably ways of finding out whether they did or didn't.
Right.
It would seem to be a very stupid thing for them to do. On the other hand, sometimes when people get desperate, they can do some pretty stupid things.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. We have a guest panelist now, Brian Skow. Welcome to the show. Brian Skow is a UFO researcher and investigator, a physicist. And Brian, great job on the interview there.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We heard so much about the Brookings Report and all of the studying of the face on Mars. Can you give us a little idea about the Brookings Report and what it means?
Yes, in 1960, the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., they, on request of NASA, they had a contract with NASA, and they did a report for them on what NASA should do if they did find artifacts on other planets such as Venus or Mars or even the Moon. And in fact, what they had found out that of all people, the ones that would be most devastated by such findings would be scientists and engineers. And then they went on to say that if such findings did occur and they were made public, not only would it devastate the scientists, but it would also cause a change throughout all society as far as religious cults are concerned. So they said that it might be best for NASA to withhold any information if they did find such artifacts or even intelligent life.
I see. Dr. Mark Carlotta has done a lot of computer enhancement work. Is that not true?
Right.
And what is your opinion of the work he's done? I know he did a lot of work in conjunction with Mr. Hoagland.
Right.
What is your opinion of what he's done and the efforts he's put forth?
Well, I think he's done very good work as far as computer enhancement is concerned, but more interesting is the fractal analysis, which he has done on the face on Mars. And what a fractal analysis tells you is whether something is of nature or if something is man-made or artificial.
Yeah, we're going to try to get into more of that on our second show,
right,
talking about the fractal analysis.
Right.
What about the photographs? Has there been an attempt to conceal photographs of the face on Mars and to, or change them even, or whatever, as far as NASA is concerned? And NASA is a public, supposed to be operating for the benefit of the public, and wasn't there a document one time where they stated they would definitely tell us if there was any findings through their efforts with probes or observers to let us know if there was intelligent life out there? And do you think they've kept that promise?
Well, actually, recently they haven't kept that promise with the Mars Observer. What happened with the Mars Observer was after it was sent up, they announced their guidelines for releasing photographs to the public, and it wasn't going to be in real time. That is to say, as soon as they got an image on their screen, they weren't going to let the public see that. They were gonna wait a few months to work out the flaws, and then the images would be made public. And it's really a form of censorship. So it goes back to the Brookings report. If they did find something, we would never know because it's not in real time. They would have a certain amount of censorship as far as the photographs are concerned. And then that even brings up another point with Richard Hoagland, who claims that maybe NASA does have contact with the Mars Observer, even though they're telling us that it's lost. So that might just be another form of censorship.
You think so? Right now, I think would be a good time to get into the Hoagland tapes, and are we ready to do that? The video you're about to be shown is a slide presentation by Richard Hoagland made on Journey, a program much like the one airing in Seattle, Washington. UFO Update would like to thank the producers, Brenda Roberts, Dan Chick, and for all of them letting us use this cablecast for part of our program here.
There is a face on Mars, and it looks a lot like us. Join me on a journey exploring the face and the monuments of Mars.
This is the story of the monuments of Mars. About 30 years ago, when NASA was being put together, the idea was that if there were ETs out there, if somebody existed somewhere far across the universe, that they would send us radio signals. But in 1976, when we sent the Viking mission to Mars, what we found instead was this. This is a monument. This is a structure. This is something enigmatic lying on the surface of the planet Mars, whereby everything our science says we think we know, it should not exist. This is the fabled face on Mars, and this is the actual photograph in NASA's files which two gentlemen, DiPietro and Molinari, who were engineers at the Goddard Space Flight Center, found in 1979 when they went looking in the NASA files to confirm that this in fact was not a trick of lighting, but was a real photograph. Many years later, this is now about 1985, when I had put together several teams of scientists after I'd come into this problem in 1983, this is what this photograph turned into. This is now a computerized shot, carefully analyzed by Dr. Mark Carlotto, who was an imaging scientist at the Analytic Sciences Corporation in Reading, Massachusetts, and a member of our team. And what he has done is to provide stunning confirmation of the detail that exists. This is now the low sun angle of the face on Mars. The sun was about 10 degrees above the northwest horizon. It was roughly 6 o'clock local time on Mars when Viking, 1,000 miles overhead, took this photograph and sent it back to Earth. But if we only had this shot, Brenda, if we only could see this photo, you and I would not be sitting here, because no one would ever have thought this was a mystery worthy of exploring. It took this photograph, which was taken about 35 days later and was found by DiPietro and Molinari some years ago, to bring this to the current interest in the scientific community. Because what this photograph reveals is in fact that there are two eye sockets in the face on Mars. The mouth goes through, the hairline seems to go around. In other words, this has all the attributes and prerequisites of a three-dimensional statue. And so it basically set up the problem. But still, this would not be a problem for the scientific community were it not for the work I'm going to show you now. And now we have a piece of video, which I brought in addition to the slides. This, of course, is Cydonia in 3 dimensions. Dr. Carlotto at the Ionic Sciences Corporation took the original work of DiPietro Molinari. He added color to it. And then if we look at the upper right corner, you'll see that there's the face. And now we're going to go to a close-up, and this is what the face on Mars looks like when you've done very high-end computer image processing and you have brought out all the information in the original 2-dimensional data tapes. This now is the high sun angle that DiPietro and Molinari found, and what Dr. Carlotto has done is to move the computer around like a synthetic camera. And what we discover in this is that the face on Mars is very long. It's about a mile long, but it's only 1,500 feet high. It is a primitive hominid image, Brenda, looking very much like our own primitive ancestors here on Earth.
And a mile long.
A mile long.
As big as...
But if we come back to the slides, what we see is that the face is embedded in a context. Because my work, which basically was to look at the relationship of the face to the other things at Cydonia, revealed that in addition to the face on Mars, there was a collection of pyramids that we call the city over here. And then if we stand in the center of the pyramids and we look across the face in this direction, we see a long linear feature, which we call the cliff, sitting on the ramparts of an impact crater, which is about 2 miles across. If we then follow the blue line down to this object, it's a round mound-like object we call the tholus, which means mound in Latin, by the way, which is located due east of the center of the city. That's the yellow line. And then if we move along the blue line, over here, we see a 5-sided structure which looks like a pyramid, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Moving on, as we focus on the city, on this collection of pyramids, we can see that they're very regular, very angular, very geometric. And more important, perhaps, they are located in the best position on the whole surface of this Cydonia plain to view the face on Mars as a profile, as we saw it on the computer plot. The bottom line is this. There is a stunning amount of unusual shapes, all configured relatively close to each other on the Martian landscape at a northern desert latitude of about 40 degrees north of the equator. We had Viking pictures that had a very limited resolution. The smallest thing we could see on the Viking frames was something like 50 meters across. That's 150 feet. If, however, we had better pictures, if we had, for instance, pictures from this spacecraft, which was NASA's Mars Observer, we would have been able to finally resolve the issue. We would have been finally be able to put the end cap, the climax on 17 years of wondering and worrying and debate and doubt, are there really monuments on Mars? Now, because that spacecraft is missing,
The observer.
we may
It's
not
not
know.
observing, is it?
And of course, we think that NASA has in fact not lost the spacecraft, but there is an ulterior agenda. There is a hidden agenda that we are in the process of trying to get to the bottom of.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. I want to tell everyone out there, and I want to apologize for not mentioning it, that you can call us here. We are live. Call us here at 651-1221. We're taking questions only on the Face on Mars at this particular time. So if you have a question on the Face on Mars, be sure and give us a call. Terry, digital enhancement work that was done with photographs taken by the Viking probe in 1976, can you give us a report on that so we can get some idea of what that showed back in 1976?
Fine. I brought a graphic, and if with Pat's help, we can maybe get through this. First of all, this is just a representation of the face. The square that we see here is a mile square. The face itself is a mile wide by a mile and a half long, at least by best estimate. Now, the pictures that we see aren't pictures in the traditional sense. They're not photographic images. They're computer processed images. And what that means is that each image is made up basically of a number of smaller images. Now, with the equipment that was used on the face on Mars, the resolution was only good down to about 500 feet square. All right. Now, the problem with that is that any detail that fell within that 500-foot square had to be averaged out by the computer, so detail was lost. Now, the Mars Observer was to take care of those problems for the entire surface of the planet by decreasing the size of the pixel so that less information was going to be lost when the image had to be averaged out within the pixel area. So unfortunately, as we've learned, the Mars Observer is not transmitting, and we're not getting the benefit of the better technology.
So we're not getting the benefit of the better technology with this probe.
Right.
Do you think this probe that we lost, do you think if that probe had taken some pictures, we would have the final answer now to this face on Mars?
We definitely would have had better images, and that would have given us a little better tool to work with. We can't say that they're artificial or natural without that kind of improved enhancement. So we would probably have some better idea. We'd probably still be divided. This would probably still be a controversy until somebody actually lands there and takes a good close look at it.
Okay. I understand, panel, we have a caller on the phone. His name is Don. Don, you're on UFO Update Live.
Good evening, gentlemen. I got a question for you, but it's rather lengthy, and I want to put it in perspective with you. Years ago, the government had brought about under the table on drawing board to put a probing satellite into space. This I know firsthand. But as time went on, knowing how the government works, they kind of put it on the sidelines. Recently, I was told through proper and correct scuttlebutt that this, the instrument that's up there now observing Mars has really put the fear in the pants of the government. It has brought about in the past couple of years sending up another satellite that's supposed to be observing incoming meteorites, so-and-so and so-and-so, to observe any alien bodies coming down doing detrimental harm to not only our country but to the world. Is there any truth? Have you heard anything of this nature?
Yes.
Go ahead, Pat.
Yes. What satellite you're talking about is a DSP satellite. In fact, the DSP blankets the Earth. Now, that's the one that I'm aware of. And it can see through any kind of mist, fog, or whatever. And how it works, basically, when anything that's released, there's an infrared signature. And what the technician does is place a light pencil on an infrared signature, and it'll tell him whether it's a Cessna aircraft, whatever type of missile it is, or whatever. What they've observed, according to Freedom of Information documents and witnesses, is that they have well, first of all, they have a special category for anomalous aerial phenomena, and at least 3 times a year they have observed, I guess you'd call flying saucers, for lack of a better term, coming in from outer space. Secondly, the first thing, what put us onto this was an Iranian jet incident in 1976 that was actually tracked by these DSP satellites. There's a man by the name of Lee Graham who worked on these, and he had first-hand knowledge because he worked on that particular system, so he knows what it can do. And through good detective work and Freedom of Information work, he's uncovered quite a bit about it. But there's some truth to it as far as we can determine, yes.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for your call, Don. Brian, concerning the face on Mars and the ape-like face, some people have referred to it at least that way. Can you account for that? And also, can you give us any idea of how old the face on Mars might be, regardless of whether it is actually a face or whether it's a natural structure?
Right. Well, as far as the face is concerned, it really doesn't look like a Homo sapien, really. You're right in that. It certainly does look like more of an ape man, really. Which, if you wanted to go back to, I believe, was it Homo erectus that was 100,000 years ago?
Yes, right.
Hundreds of thousands of years ago. It does fit into the timeline which Richard Hoagland has proposed for the face on Mars. And he has found that the winter solstice would rise up over the face on Mars if you were standing in what he calls the city structure, which is in the Cydonia region, and that would have occurred 330,000 years ago. So indeed, that's probably what a human would have looked like back then. So it would be interesting if that is the case.
Do we have something, Pat, that you want to show us here?
Well, what I want to do is talk just for a second about, we were talking about image enhancement and some of the problems with it, and the fact that they average the pixels out and whatnot. But this is something that, as we get into the mathematics, hopefully, and the measurements, it's called the D&M pyramid, and it's a 5-sided pyramid. Many of the measurements are based on this pyramid. Now there's a star-shaped pattern. I don't know if we have a depiction over there. An overlay of this particular geometrical pattern goes over the D&M pyramid here. And now all the measurements, or most of the measurements, are based on sight lines that come out here, here, and here on the D&M pyramid. The problem with that is that this side is in darkness. And this is a best fit diagram, which we just showed you. I don't know if I'm driving the camera people crazy here. And we really don't know that any of these measurements are accurate in any sense of the word, because they could be 10 or 20 or 30 degrees off. So one of the problems with those type of enhancements, they're just simply not accurate. In the same way on the face, it's shrouded in darkness. We know there's a socket here, but we can't tell if it's symmetrical. We know this mouth extends over. We can't tell if it's symmetrical. So those are just a few of the problems that you have with the photographs that have come back.
Computer enhancement, all it can do is work with the information that's already there. It cannot add information. So if we're trying to find something out about these images just through enhancement, we're not going to find out a whole lot more than with the raw data. Basically, all you do with the enhancement is clean it up, because you have a set of data that you can't expand. It's already there. So many of the problems that are involved with looking into this and trying to analyze it comes back down to the fact that we just simply need much better images, because relying on enhancements isn't accurate enough.
You might, as we talk about some of the other things, we talk about geomorphology, we talk about what are the origins of the geography and geology of the planet. And for instance, if you get into some of these things, there are explanations for many of the things that are used for measurement and whatnot, in the complex. I don't want to get too far afield, but this is something called a tholus, which simply means mound. And in fact, there are many, many mounds on the planet. I don't know how far we want to get into that tonight because it's going to relate to all the mathematics and what have you, but there are explanations for many of the things that Mr. Hoagland puts forth. And in fact, he has said that the five-sided pyramid cannot occur in nature. Well, it hasn't occurred on the planet Earth, but according to local experts, it could possibly occur.
Pat, I think we got the tape ready. Let's roll to that second tape. We have a phone call first? Okay, we have a phone call. I believe the gentleman's name is Bill. Bill, you're on UFO Update Live.
How you doing?
Fine, sir. How you doing?
I'm trying to see if I can hear you without the TV on. Can you hear me now still?
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can
Okay, I hear you on the phone. This is really interesting. I haven't heard about most of this stuff elsewhere. I think I saw a few minutes of this, another one of your shows about the face on Mars. My question is the improvement in resolution relatively recent thing, the last 10 years? Is Hubble going to improve resolution, or does this type of exploration have to be done by probes? Have the Russians done anything, and so on and so forth?
Go ahead.
Anyone can tell you, the resolution has improved drastically just in the last, since '88 and on, because of the nature of computers and optics and what have you, I guess. So, yeah, it's improved quite a bit. But again, like Terry said, it can't provide information. It's not there.
Can Hubble do this type of resolution, or is it strictly probes?
Well, I don't know that Hubble...
No.
It can't pull in that much information from the distance that it will be from Mars at any given time. What we need, again, is a little better image. Now, we have to remember that what we're working with is a 15-year-old image. And in 15 years, we already know the kinds of revolutions that the computer software has gone through and hardware. And by today's standards, it's almost, well, it is obsolete. The imaging is obsolete.
Terry,
so we have a much finer technology now.
Terry, I don't mean to interrupt. And caller, we want to thank you very much for your call. But we have to go to a tape now, our second tape of Richard Hoagland, interviewed by Brenda Roberts. Please roll that tape.
One of the structures down here appears very peculiar. It doesn't look like any of the other landforms, and on the next piece of video, you'll see why. This is the three-dimensional recreation from Mark in the computer of this object that we call the fort. It is circled now here in the little box in the center of the screen. If you look at this object close up with the best enhancements of the data, you can see as we rotate around it in the computer that it looks anything like a natural mountain on Mars. It has geometry, it has interior detail, it has high ramparts and sharp edges, pointed angles. In other words, if we had one photograph from return missions, such as Mars Observer, which we'll get to later on, we would like it to be a close-up of this structure, because this, apart from the face, is the most interesting single object on Mars from a geometric perspective, looking at it with the eye. But there's another object that turns out to be even more interesting. And that object, if we can go back to the slides, is this. This is a pyramid which appears to have buttresses. It is five-sided. This is the raw version taken from the Viking images. But if we go to enhancements now, we can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. It has a crater on the right. There appears to be some damage on the right-hand side. But if we reconstruct the shape of it, it turns out to be a starfish pattern. It has 3 short sides and 2 long sides, and it's symmetric. And the symmetry is pointed directly at the face on Mars, it turns out. That's part of the relationship.
By design.
By, perhaps, design. So if we can go back to video, this is what Dr. Carlotta was able to do in the computer with this 2-dimensional Viking information, turning it into a 3-dimensional analog to what you would see if you were standing or perhaps actually flying a few thousand feet above the surface of Mars. Look particularly at the right-hand side. Notice that that shattered area, that collapsed area, appears to have levels, almost as if there was some kind of regular structure which this catastrophe, whatever caused that deformation, has revealed to the camera. Then as you work our way around, now you're looking directly at the face up off screen. Now you're in the southeast corner. Notice the buttresses. And then as we come down on the deck and we look at this in a plane view from the western side looking east, notice the strange shape. It doesn't have a point like the Egyptian pyramids, it has a flat top. But it's not the only unusual morphology or shape we have at Cydonia. If we go back to the slides and you look east from the D&M over here, you see this round thing I told you about before called the tholus. Well, this is what the tholus looks like in close-up. It looks like one of those Indian burial mounds we find in the midwestern parts of the United States, or one of the English barrows or tholi that you see studding the central part of England. It seems to be a lens shape with an upper point and with a ridge and then a lower almost ditch around it and a straight feature. In other words, it's a most unusual thing to be seen in an area where instead of protrusions you have craters, like the surface of Mars.
So it looks built.
It looks perhaps built. And then if we follow my geometry and you go about northwest from it in a line like that, up at the end of that line is this funny linear feature we call the cliff. This now is a very fine close-up of this feature. And now you can see in the best processing that Dr. Carlotto has given to us that they're really, look, you see how this area, see the shadow? You see that hollowed out area? It's about the same volume as the material required to bake this thing. But look in very closely. If Joe can push in right there and look right there at that bright dot, you see that little straight rectangle, dark black thing? The sun, Brenda, is coming in from the northwest here, in this direction.
Casting
shadows on the back, right. There's a shadow from this object. So how is this shadow facing the sun? If you look right to the right of this, there's a little bright splotch, which we suspect is a bright reflection off a window or a pane of glass or some planar surface, like a mirror or like a, like a vast crystal face, let's say, and it is reflecting toward the sun past a standing obstruction, like a post. And in fact, what you're seeing is a retro reflection, which should not exist in any natural feature on another planet that we can think of. Linear feature is sitting on this debris field around this crater, which has another unusual morphology. There's a pyramid sitting on the rim of the crater. And that pyramid is not like our normal pyramids. It, in fact, looks like this. It looks like a tetrahedron. And someday, in the not too distant future, we're going to tell you why that resemblance turns out not to be a coincidence. Why does it look like us? You said at the top of the show, a face that looks like us. That face, Brenda, should not be there. Look, for instance, at this. This is the low sun angle shot that Dr. Carlotto has now carefully enhanced using every ounce of computer image technology that we currently possess. This is the high sun angle shot. Notice when he wiped it on that the left and the right halves match perfectly. This is now the local contrast stretch. This is the final stage in computer enhancement. You're not adding anything. You're simply bringing out what's on these data tapes, and there's something profound on the data tapes. This is a humanoid face, Brenda. This should not be there. These are not Martians. This is not who was there that indigenously evolved. We are suspecting that this is a billboard. The reason it's the face on Mars, it was intended to get our attention. It was intended to make us go back. This is now the local contrast stretch of the low sun angle, and you can tell because of the long, long shadow.
Well, then this acts like an invitation, if what you're saying is true.
And the problem is that when you do all of this and you put it together and you do the computer matches and you synthesize the three-dimensional data, you wind up with very robust evidence that this three-dimensional landform is in fact a statue. It is a face. It is perchance our face, or the face of what we once used to be a long, long time ago, and it shouldn't be there.
No.
So what is it doing there? That has been the problem. The political problem to getting this taken seriously, Brenda, I firmly believe, is that face. Because if it had been anything else, if we'd seen the pyramids, if we'd seen the fort, if we'd seen the city, the tholus, but we saw, first of all, that face that morning in July of 1976, Dr. Tobias Owen, who was a member of the Viking imaging team, from Stony Brook University in New York City, and he was part of this group that was looking at these pictures. He was crawling around on his knees on the floor in a facility somewhat like this.
Thousands of pictures, right?
With Polaroid shots, and they were looking for a safe landing site for the second Viking lander. And he noticed this face, and he said, "Oh my God," which turns out to be the last official NASA reaction to this data that we've ever had. If it had not been a face, Brenda, they wouldn't, I think, have gone squirrely. But what happened is, instead of having 17 years of science and inquiry and pursuit of the monuments of Mars, pursuit of the reality of these objects, because of that face, they have tried to ignore the problem. Because the presence of the face simply says that there's something radically wrong with our concepts of evolution, and in particular, the evolution of humankind on this planet, not on Mars.
Welcome back to UFO Update Live. Before we leave, here is some information on the Roswell incident, a UFO crash which took place in New Mexico in the late 40s, an incident we discussed on a previous UFO Update show. Congressman Stephen Schiff, Congress representative from New Mexico, after getting a runaround by the Defense Department, has ordered a Government Accounting Office investigation to determine whether the Air Force suppressed information about the Roswell incident. This report was in the Washington Post for January the 30th, 1994. Gentlemen, what I want to try to tell these people is that one of the things we're concerned with, and that concerns the Roswell situation, I would like to tell our viewers that we are trying to find out more information about this Roswell situation that Congressman Schiff is having them reinvestigate, and that is the situation in Roswell was a case where a UFO landed, or an object landed in the farmer's field. The government came in, took it away. They claimed it was a balloon. Other people, many other people have told us that it was not a balloon. What we're trying to do is get people to come forth out there, because the bodies allegedly from the crashed UFO or object was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the UFO itself. We are trying to determine if anyone in this area can let us know if they had a grandfather, a great-grandfather, or someone who was there at the time at Wright-Patterson in 1947, and they can give us some information as to what really happened there. If you have any information on this that you can help us with, please call Pat Packard at 860-4250 or Peggy and Jerry Black at 625-2613. Again, tonight we have shown you some information on the face on Mars, Pat, and we were showing more of a negative type of a view, but that's not really the whole situation. And in part two, it's going to be a little bit more positive, I believe. Am I correct?
There's a whole way to go here, and it seems like we were saying some of it was gobbledygook, and maybe a little of it is, but there's a lot of very good science and very good reasons to look at the face on Mars, and we'll get into that next time and be more specific about the science and what have you.